Right, let's talk about something absolutely extraordinary happening in British politics. We're not even 6 months into this Labour government, and according to a brand new poll, nearly half of British voters already think they're weak. Not struggling, not finding their feet, weak. That's the word voters chose. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what they're saying about Reform UK. Quick favour, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the chaos, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Over 94% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes literally 1 second, and it genuinely helps us keep bringing you this content. Cheers if you did. Right, back to the absolute carnage. So here's the situation. Fresh polling data from Merlin Strategy, shared exclusively with GB News, has just dropped an absolute bombshell on Westminster. They surveyed 1,000 people between the 15th and 16th of January, and the results are nothing short of catastrophic for Sir Keir Starmer. Only 30% of Britons describe Labour as strong. 30%. Meanwhile, 45%, nearly half the country, reckon they're weak. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the party that won a landslide victory not even a year ago, and already the public has lost faith in their strength and competence. But here's where it gets properly interesting, because whilst Labour is drowning, Reform UK is apparently walking on water. According to the same poll, 48% of voters described Nigel Farage's upstart party as strong, whilst only 21% said they appeared weak. Think about that for a second. A party that's barely established, that doesn't even have double-digit seats in Parliament, is being viewed as nearly twice as strong as the actual government. That's not just a warning sign for Labour, that's a 5-alarm fire with sirens blaring and someone screaming into a megaphone. Now, you might be wondering, what about the Conservatives? Surely they're benefiting from Labour's implosion, right? Well, not exactly. The Tories are stuck in what I like to call political purgatory. 37% of voters say they appear weak, whilst 34% reckon they're strong. They're basically splitting the country down the middle, which, when you think about it, is almost worse than being definitively weak. At least if everyone agreed you were rubbish, you'd know what you needed to fix. The Conservatives under Kemi Badenoch are in this awkward limbo where nobody can quite decide if they're a credible opposition or yesterday's news. But wait, because it gets even more brutal for Labour. The poll didn't just ask about strength and weakness. Oh no, they went deeper. They asked whether people thought each party was trending upward or downward. And the results for Labour are genuinely shocking. 59% of Britons believe Labour is trending down. Trending down? We're talking about nearly 6 in 10 people looking at the government and thinking, yeah, this lot are on a downward spiral. Only 24% felt the party was on the up. That's a ratio of more than 2 to 1 seeing decline versus growth. The Conservatives aren't faring much better in the momentum stakes, to be fair. 48% reckon they're losing steam, compared to 30% who think they're on the rise. But here's the kicker. Reform UK has pulled off a clear majority, 55%, who believe the party is ascending, whilst just 22% think it's trending down. The Green Party, for what it's worth, is completely mixed. 31% say rising, 32% say falling, and more than a third aren't even sure. Classic Greens, always keeping us guessing. Now, if you're Keir Starmer sitting in number 10, these numbers should be keeping you awake at night. Actually, scratch that. These numbers should have you considering whether you left the stove on, locked the front door, and accidentally destroyed your own political party all at the same time. Because here's the thing. Governments are supposed to have a honeymoon period, that magical window after winning an election where the public gives you the benefit of the doubt, where your approval ratings are decent, where people are willing to wait and see what you'll do. Labour appears to have skipped the honeymoon entirely and gone straight to the messy divorce. So what's causing this spectacular collapse in public confidence? Well, it's not exactly rocket science, is it? Since taking office, Labour has been plagued by a series of self-inflicted wounds. There was the winter fuel payment debacle, where they decided cutting support for pensioners was somehow good politics. There's been the constant flip-flopping on policy positions, the freebies scandal that engulfed multiple ministers, and let's not forget the tax rises that directly contradicted their manifesto promises. When you promise not to raise taxes on working people and then immediately raise national insurance contributions from employers, a move that everyone with half a brain knows will impact workers, people tend to notice. But here's where the story takes an absolutely delicious turn, because whilst Labour is busy imploding, Reform UK just pulled off a political coup that has Westminster absolutely buzzing. Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister and one-time Conservative leadership contender, has defected to Reform. That's right, a former shadow secretary has jumped ship from the Tories to join Nigel Farage's insurgent party. And according to the polling data, 1 in 5 Britons are now more likely to vote for Reform following Jenrick's defection. 1 in 5, that's not a marginal shift, that's a seismic movement in British politics. And in theory, using social media to communicate government work makes sense. We live in a digital age. People consume information on these platforms. Transparency about enforcement activities could theoretically build public confidence. But there is a massive gap between theory and execution. What the government has actually created is a piece of content so tone-deaf, so obviously performative, that it has become a lightning rod for mockery. The dramatic music, the action movie editing, the whole vibe of it screams, "trying too hard." It feels like when your dad tries to use youth slang and somehow makes everything infinitely more awkward. How do you do, fellow border security enthusiasts? It is the governmental equivalent of that. And here is the truly delicious irony in all of this. The government launched this TikTok account presumably to control the narrative around migration and border security. They wanted to show strength, competence, results. Instead, they have handed their critics an absolute gift. They have created a focal point for every joke, every criticism, every ounce of skepticism about their migration policies. The comment section of that lone video has become a digital town square where the British public is exercising its God-given right to take the absolute piss out of authority figures who have made themselves look silly. The question we must ask is, what were they thinking? Did nobody in the entire chain of approval for this project raise their hand and say, hang on, might this come across as a bit daft? Was there no moment of reflection where someone thought perhaps a social media account is not the solution to a complex humanitarian and political crisis? The fact that this made it through multiple levels of government bureaucracy and political oversight without anyone pumping the brakes is genuinely fascinating from a decision-making perspective. You also have to spare a thought for the poor social media manager who has been assigned to run this account. Imagine that job description. Wanted, social media expert to make illegal immigration enforcement engaging and shareable. Must be comfortable with constant mockery and single-digit engagement rates. Thick skin essential. Apply within. That person is currently living through what can only be described as a professional nightmare. They are the face of one of the most ridiculed government initiatives in recent memory, and they have to keep posting through it all with a stiff upper lip. What makes this entire situation even more absurd is the timing. We are in January 2026. TikTok is hardly new or cutting edge anymore. If the government had launched this 5 years ago, it might have seemed innovative, ahead of the curve. But now it just looks like everyone finally caught up to what young people were doing in 2019 and decided to copy it without understanding why it worked in the first place. It is the policy equivalent of your mum finally getting Snapchat just as everyone has moved on to the next thing. The broader context here matters too. This is not happening in a vacuum. The UK has been grappling with migration issues for years. The small boats crisis has dominated headlines. Different governments have tried different approaches, from the Rwanda scheme to increased channel patrols to international agreements. Some of these approaches have been more successful than others. Some have been controversial. Some have been legally challenged. But what they all had in common was that they were actual policy interventions, not marketing exercises. That is ultimately what makes this TikTok account so frustrating for people across the political spectrum. It feels like style over substance. It feels like the government is more concerned about appearing to do something than actually doing something effective. And when you combine that perception with the fact that the execution has been so spectacularly poor that even the attempt to appear effective has failed, you end up with this perfect storm of ridicule. The deeper issue is trust. When governments resort to what look like gimmicks, it erodes public trust in their ability to handle serious issues. People want to believe their leaders are focused on solving problems, not on getting followers and engagement metrics. They want policy, not performance. They want results, not reels. And when those two things get confused, when the communication strategy becomes more prominent than the actual strategy,